Was it self-defense or murder? Mother of four, Quaneesha Johnson claims that self-defense is the reason that she shot her boyfriend Demonte Smith to death last November following a domestic dispute.
Spoke to her for the first time, Ted, because even though she was sentenced to 5 years confinement, she is out on bond pending her appeal. So we got to see her walking out of the courthouse with her children, with her family. They've been upbeat when they go into the courtroom every day, but today was a different kind of relief, a different kind of happiness from those family members.
With every murder case we discuss, we discover the different reasons why people end up at the center of these discussions. People commit murders because of personal conflicts, domestic violence, financial gain, or psychological disorders. The intent and reasoning behind a murder determines the weight of the punishment. Sometimes, the adequate punishment is clear as day, from the backstory to the evidence to credible and non-credible witnesses. Before the jury gathers and the judge metes out a sentence, we have already made the calculations and zeroed in our expectations. Other cases can be more complex. Even with the clearest evidence, the different scenarios that build up to that life-changing moment can change our perspective. This is one of those complex cases. In the morning of November 27, 2022, Quaneesha was returning home from a night of partying and celebrating with her friends. She spoke on the phone with her boyfriend Demonte as she drove. She was supposed to be home earlier. He was very angry that she was late and had threatened to hit her the moment she arrived. Feeling unsafe and scared that he might carry out his threats, Quaneesha called 911 and requested a police escort. Officers responded but couldn't seem to cool off the heating fire between the couple. They both kept screaming at each other. At a point, Quaneesha turned her anger to the responding officers. As she kept screaming at the officers, she mentioned having a gun and using it to defend herself if Demonte tried to hurt her. Perhaps the officers did not think she would have to do anything. Regardless, she was advised to leave her firearm in her car. The officers asked Quaneesha and Demonte to get back inside the house and try to calm down. The couple went in, and the officers remained on the scene. They planned to attempt to de-escalate the situation again, but after they had both had time to cool off. Quaneesha did not remain in the house for long. She went into her car and grabbed a metal rod and her gun before going back into the house. Just moments later, a gunshot was heard from Quaneesha's home. Demonte, as he struggled to remain on his feet, staggered to the police officers and told them what had happened in the house. Quaneesha had hit him in the head with the rod and then shot him. Before he collapsed, he asked the officers to help him before he died. Quaneesha was arrested moments after and was taken into custody. Sadly, a ride Demonte had called earlier arrived, but he would never be able to leave. Demonte did not survive his injuries. From trying to settle a domestic squabble, the police now had a murder on their hands. Was this the self-defense Quaneesha warned the officers about?
Was it self-defense or murder? Mother of four, Quaneesha Johnson claims that self-defense is the reason that she shot her boyfriend Demonte Smith to death last November following a domestic dispute. Police responded to her 911 calls, but the shooting happened after they left her house.
Did Quaneesha act out of rage and malice? What happened when Quaneesha and Demonte went into the house? Quaneesha Nicole Johnson was born in May 1993. She spent most of her life in Philadelphia and recently relocated to Atlanta, Georgia. She is a 30-year-old behavioral health technician and a mother of four. On December 1st, 2021, she moved into a 3-bedroom, 3-bathroom, 2-story rental property on Edenberry Lane in Lithonia. The lease to the property was in her name, as well as the utilities. With her 4 children belonging to different fathers, Quaneesha did not seem to be very lucky in relationships. However, it was obvious that she was an ambitious woman who cared about her children. Demonte had graduated from the University City High School and the College of DuPage. Before he started seeing Quaneesha, Demonte had 3 children of his own, and at the time of his death, he was 29 years old. How Demonte and Quaneesha met and how long they had been together is not really known, but the couple had a baby together. A month after she gave birth, Demonte moved into Quaneesha's home in Edenberry Lane sometime in October. According to Quaneesha, Demonte was going through legal and financial struggles. He had recently been released from prison for felony charges. Things were a bit rough for him, and he had nowhere else to go. Living together did not go as the couple planned. Within a few weeks of Demonte moving in, they argued endlessly. During their many arguments, Demonte would usually threaten to physically harm Quaneesha. These remained ordinary threats for some weeks, but in early November, Demonte made his threats a reality. In the week of November 6, during one of their arguments, Demonte grabbed Quaneesha and slammed her into the ground. According to Quaneesha, this incident put her on her guard. 2 weeks after being physically assaulted by the father of her child, Quaneesha got invited to a birthday celebration. She had just gotten out of a 9-month pregnancy, was working full-time, and nursing a 2-month-old, and was desperate for some time off. One of Quaneesha's friends was celebrating her birthday in a nightclub on November 26. Demonte and Quaneesha deliberated and decided that the scenery change would be good for Quaneesha. She left all 4 children in Demonte's care and assured him that she would be back by 6 a.m. on November 27th. Quaneesha kept her boyfriend in the loop through phone calls. Sometime during the night, she told him that she and her friends had gotten into a fight with some other group at the club. It was not a serious fight, they just screamed at each other for a while and ended up leaving the club. But Demonte was a little concerned, and his concern grew into worry when 6 a.m. rolled by, and Quaneesha was not back at the house nor called to reassure him. He was worried that the screaming match at the club had turned into something bigger, and perhaps the mother of his 2-month-old child had gotten hurt. Demonte called Quaneesha, but her phone was turned off. He then called 2 of her aunts, Rochelle and Andreas, and told them of his dilemma, and they all became worried that they could not reach Quaneesha. They began to call local hospitals and jails, hoping to locate her, but they just could not find Quaneesha. Demonte's worry somehow turned into anger as the hours went by. He believed Quaneesha had intentionally turned her phone off and was busy cheating on him and making him out to be a fool. He sent her threatening text messages about how he was going to hurt her the second she got home. Around 9 a.m. on November 27th, Quaneesha finally turned her phone on and saw all the text messages Demonte had left her. The threatening text scared her, so she called her worried aunts and had them place Demonte on a group call. He was still very angry over the phone and repeated what he had texted. He was going to physically assault her when she got home. When Quaneesha was a few minutes away from home, she called 911 and demanded a police escort. She also mentioned that her boyfriend was threatening her and she wanted him out of her house. Quaneesha arrived with police escorts around 11 a.m. and Demonte came out of the house carrying their 2-month-old baby dressed only in diapers. The sight of her infant shirtless in the 60-degree weather that she considered cool infuriated her. The 2 officers who had responded to her tried to de-escalate the situation, but the couple kept screaming at each other. Quaneesha insisted that Demonte handed the baby over to her, and he refused. The police deputies, in an attempt to prevent conflict, asked Demonte to hand the child to Quaneesha, but he still refused to. Quaneesha went on yelling about how Demonte was not the father of the child he was holding, and he was not on the birth certificate. She bluffed about disappearing for another 3 hours and asked what Demonte would do if she did. The police kept trying to intervene in the situation, but Quaneesha became aggressive toward them as well. They finally got through to the couple and convinced them to go cool down at the house. Demonte went into the house first. Quaneesha would go in after him, but before she did, she warned the officers of what might happen if Demonte put his hands on her. She mentioned that she was a licensed carrier and this residence was in her name. If Demonte tried to hurt her for the second time in 2 weeks, she would shoot him in self-defense. She also mentioned that she had looked up the self-defense law.
Get down to my ass tonight. So when I shoot him for self-defense, then what? Because I'm licensed. So if I shoot him in my residency, because he's in here trying to kill me for the second time, then what? I'll have him. You hear this, right? You heard what he just said? I'm going to ask you tonight. So when I shoot him, and I just call the cops and That's how I'm going to articulate. I can't understand yours. You better really be able to articulate that.
The officers tried to help Quaneesha understand the gravity of what she was saying, but it seemed she was clear. After confirming that there were no weapons in the car, Quaneesha went into her home. The officers, however, remained close to the house. They planned to try to resolve the conflict once again, but only after Quaneesha and Demonte had both calmed down. Moments after going into the house, Quaneesha came outside. She headed to her car and grabbed a metal rod and her gun. Moments after Quaneesha returned to the house with these two items, a gunshot was heard. Demonte exited the house, stumbled towards the deputies and told them, "She hit me in the head with a metal thing and then shot me. Hurry before I die." He collapsed moments later. Quaneesha was arrested immediately, leaving our children scared and confused. As she was dragged with handcuffs past the car that Demonte was in, she was heard screaming "bye" multiple times. A rideshare that Demonte had ordered arrived at the house, but he had to be transported via the police car. Demonte was transferred to the Emory Hellendale Medical Center, where he succumbed to his wounds. Investigators discovered that after Quaneesha went back in her car to grab her gun and the metal rod, she directed her 7-year-old to call 911. She told the child to report that Demonte had hit her. According to officials, she then hit him on the head with the rod and shot him. Quaneesha was held at the DeKalb County Police Headquarters, and when she was questioned, she confessed that Demonte had not hit her that day. Demonte was also believed to have tried to leave the home, as Quaneesha initially wanted. Quaneesha Johnson was charged with voluntary manslaughter, 1 count of malice murder, 2 counts of aggravated assault, family violence, 2 counts of cruelty to children in the 3rd degree, and possession of a firearm during the commission of a felony. Before the trial, the defense tried to get Quaneesha's charges tossed with an immunity claim. The point of this first hearing was to get the judge to look over every aspect of the case and decide if self-defense was actually needed at Quaneesha's home that morning. Prosecutors believed there was no threat to Quaneesha's life at the moment, and she grabbed weapons with the sole intent to kill. The defense argued that Quaneesha was trying to defend herself from the abuse Demonte had put her through in the past. According to defense, Quaneesha had to get weapons for her protection, since the police had failed to adequately intervene. However, the prosecutors were able to successfully argue that Quaneesha did not need to pull the trigger. The immunity claim was dismissed, and the case was transferred before a jury that had already been selected. On August 22, 2023, Quaneesha Johnson's trial began. Prosecutor Farhan Shah delivered the stage's opening statement. He ran the jury through the events that led to the crime. From going clubbing to Demonte threatening her on the 3-way call with her aunts, he also mentioned that Quaneesha had told the police that she did not take Demonte's threat seriously. Regardless, she called 911 3 times on her way home. The first she called, the police responded to her location, but she was not home. The responders had another call, so they had left before Quaneesha got to her house. As they left her house, they informed Quaneesha and instructed her to remain outside the house until they returned. When Quaneesha got home, she impatiently called 911 2 more times. Prosecutor Farhan also mentioned how the police report described Quaneesha confronting Demonte without any fear. According to the prosecutor, Quaneesha was the primary aggressor who had planned to murder her boyfriend as she drove home that morning.
Holding his infant child, and she fearlessly approaches Demonte and tries to grab the kid. And then, not only that, the entire time, y'all get to hear she says things like, "That's not even your baby. That's not even your kid. You're not even on the birth certificate. I'm going to disappear again for 3 hours. What are you going to do then?" This is all in front of the police.
Defense attorney Michael Sterling gave the opening statement. He described Quaneesha as a new mother who was left defenseless by police officers who knew better. She was getting threatened by Demonte, and she asked for help, as the law had instructed. The first responders had left her house because of another dispatch and asked her to wait outside, which she did, but she was outside for a long time, so she called 2 more times. While waiting, she tripped her burglar alarm system, hoping the alarm company would call and get the police down to her location. But just like the other times she tried to get the police to her home, she ended up waiting aimlessly. When the police did not show up, she drove around her neighborhood until she found patrol officers and asked them to escort her home. Demonte would not open the door when the officers knocked, so Quaneesha had to use her key. Attorney Sterling discussed how Demonte picked up their sleeping 2-month-old with a soiled diaper as a prop when the police got the door opened. The police got frustrated with Quaneesha and Demonte arguing and were getting ready to leave. Demonte walked past Quaneesha and told her that he would physically assault her as soon as the police left the scene. She quickly raised an alarm and asked the police what happens if she defends herself as a licensed carrier. The police did not offer much help. When Quaneesha got back into the house, she handed both of her daughters 2 cell phones and asked them to call 911 reporting an assault. She then returns to her car, grabs a tire iron, and stuffed her gun in her pocket. She goes back into the house, climbs up the stairs, and picks up her 2-month-old with the tire iron still in her hand. She threatens to hit Demonte with the metal if he comes near her. When he would not listen and kept coming at her, she raised the metal rod to hit him, but it fell out of her hands. Demonte then charged at her. That was when she used her gun and fired a single shot at Demonte. The defense maintained that Quaneesha did not need to call the police multiple times, trigger her own alarm system, wait outside for over an hour, or drive around in search of a police officer if she already planned to murder Demonte. She did everything she could to avoid the situation, and when she had no choice, she defended herself.
Quaneesha Johnson pleaded for protection, cried for help, and she was left defenseless by police officers who knew better. She was left defenseless against a serial abuser by police officers who knew better.
The first witness was Demonte's ex-girlfriend, Heather Stone, who testified that Demonte was on his way to her house, and she had ordered him an Uber. She was also the victim's good character witness for the state. Heather described him as kind, funny, and all-around good person.
A great person. He always laughing, caring, very oriented, always laughing, joking. She was just a great person.
Did he have a nickname he went by?
The defense took her testimony as an opportunity to ask this witness about the past convictions of the late Demonte Smith, many of which were violence-related, including violence against children. Another witness who took to the stand was Maisha Brown, who responded to Quaneesha's first 911 call at 10:09 a.m. Maisha was questioned regarding the first call, the second call made at 11:04 a.m., and the third call made at 11:40 a.m.
Repeat your question, what did you say?
Do you have any indication, does communications have any indication in the transcript or otherwise that there was contact made with, direct contact made with the caller by an officer?
Yes.
And what time was that?
At 10:29 a.m.
Time was the second call made, if you're able to say?
At 11:04 a.m.
On the second day of trial, Quaneesha's now 8-year-old daughter Angela was brought to the witness stand by the prosecution. The call Angela made upon Quaneesha's request was also played to the court.
What's the address?
When questioned by the defense, Angela testified that her mother asked her to call 911.
Now, when your mom came into the house that day, she asked you to call 911?
Yes.
She gave you her phone?
Yes.
And did you know that there were police already outside that day?
No.
Okay. Did she tell you why she wanted you to call 911?
Cause he was hitting her.
Okay. And
Demonte had hit her mother, but she did not see most of what happened. However, she heard a gunshot.
and you said that you heard a gunshot?
Yes.
Did you actually see a gun? Did you see your mom pull a gun and shoot?
I didn't see her pull a gun.
When the prosecution questioned Angela, her story wavered. She had initially told the police officers that Quaneesha had hit Demonte with a metal pole. However, when asked in court, she said Demonte had used the pole against her mother.
Did you say your mom and Dola went upstairs and mommy hit him with a pole?
No, Dola hit him with her pole.
Okay.
Another piece of evidence presented to the court was the ring camera footage captured after Demonte stumbled out of the house, asking the police for help. Quaneesha stormed out yelling, "I told you blank would do it." There was a debate as to whether the pronoun used in that statement was I or he. The state's investigator testified that he heard her say, "I told you I would do it." A medical examiner also took to the stand, presenting Demonte's autopsy pictures. His bullet wound was through his right shoulder and armpit. The examiner mentioned that he could not find any abrasion on Demonte that proved that he had been hit with a tool like a tire iron, nor determined whether his cause of death was self-defense or homicide. The defense finally brought Quaneesha to the stand, and she recounted the events from November 26th to November 27th, 2022.
I let Demonte know where I was going. That was it. I got ready to go. I leave out. We go to one club.
Let's go back.
Okay.
Tell us a
She walked the court through the fight at one of the clubs and how she had shared her location with Demonte after she told him about the said fight.
And what's the name of the place you were working?
It's called Taste.
Okay. Let's go back. About what time is this when you communicate with Demonte about the altercation?
She also physically demonstrated what had occurred when Demonte first put his hands on her 2 weeks before the shooting.
Now, was there any reason why you took these threats seriously?
Yes, because
She also mentioned that she reached out to Demonte's mother through text after he had slammed her to the ground.
and I contacted his mom, or tried to contact his mom.
She shared how scared she was after Demonte threatened her that she did not want to go into the house alone. She also mentioned telling the cops immediately after Demonte threatened her in their presence, but they did not say anything in response.
And that's Rochelle Newell, Andrea Gonzalez.
Yes.
And he says when the cops leave, I'm going to beat your ass.
Yes.
And do you inform the cops of what he's just said?
Immediately.
And what do they do? What's their response?
I asked them, I said, did y'all just hear him? I repeated what he just said. They didn't say it. I don't believe they said anything.
She also described and demonstrated what had occurred when she went into the house.
Will you step down for us, Ms. Johnson? And so you're coming up the stairs.
I just had this man out of the figure.
Okay. Now, what was your 2-month-old like?
I did not remember.
So,
I was soon to be dead.
Okay.
I just had to finish.
what was going through your mind?
When attorney Sterling asked, she couldn't properly explain why she kept saying bye to Demonte.
What was going through your mind?
I don't know. Like, I just know that I had to defend myself.
However, she clarified the infamous statement that was being debated and claimed she said, "I told you he was going to do it."
What did you say to the police who were still waiting outside?
That I told y'all he was going to do it.
During cross-examination, the prosecutor questioned Quaneesha's decision to leave 3 children with a man she claimed was a serial abuser.
Even though this man has put his hands on me and he has been violent to me, I'm going to leave my 3 children under the age of 8 in his custody all night. Is that right?
Prosecutor Farhan also asked her about her repeatedly saying bye to the dying Demonte. But, like with the direct examination, she struggled to give a reason for her actions.
And do you understand that no one can make or compel you to testify? That is, do you understand that you have the right to not testify if you do not want to?
The defense also intended to bring in an additional witness, a woman who was in a situation similar to Quaneesha's back in 2018. She had reported Demonte of physically assaulting and threatening to kill her. However, the defense could not get a hold of this star witness all of a sudden. The defense believed Demonte's family had intercepted and gotten the witness to cower. The prosecution also added that they had been trying to reach this witness as well, and they were not involved in any witness blocking. Prosecutor Jennifer Scacco gave the state's closing statement where she urged the jury to make a fair verdict based on facts and evidence, not their feelings.
And she pulled a trigger when there was no necessity. We asked a lot during jury selection whether you could be a fair and impartial juror, whether you could leave certain things outside from your decision in this case, whether you could focus on the evidence.
After her admonishment, she breaks down every charge against Quaneesha Johnson. Attorney Sterling delivered the defense's closing arguments.
Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, let me make a confession. I've got butterflies in my stomach. My palms are sweaty. I've got palpitations in my heart. I am nervous.
He mentioned that law enforcement did not consider Demonte's intention, and neither was the prosecution.
A promise that Ms. Johnson took seriously, but the police and the state does not.
Quaneesha intended to get a restraining order against him the very next day.
Tomorrow, that's not what she said. What she actually said was, yeah, we'll see what happens when you're gone tomorrow when I get a restraining order against you.
But Demonte Smith had not only the intent to hurt her, but the history to back it up. He had not only slammed Quaneesha to the ground, he had also punched his own 12-year-old son in the face. Quaneesha did everything right by the book, and went a step further by having her daughters call 911. Demonte had not hit her, but she did not have to wait to be assaulted before she defended herself, according to the law.
You don't have to wait until you're getting beat up, till you're wrestling for your weapon, until you're getting bruised and battered again. You don't have to wait. It's sufficient.
During the jury's deliberation, they requested to see the body cam from when Demonte was shot and stumbling. They mentioned that the audio was very noisy and they could hear anything of importance. After the jury's deliberation was complete, they returned with a verdict. On August 25, 2023, Quaneesha Johnson was declared not guilty on her first count malice murder.
Spoke to her for the first time, Ted, because even though she was sentenced to 5 years confinement, she is out on bond, pending her appeal. So we got to see her walking out of the courthouse with her children, with her family. They've been upbeat when they go into the courtroom every day, but today was a different kind of relief, a different kind of happiness from those family members.
She was, however, found guilty of 6 other charges: voluntary manslaughter, 2 counts of aggravated assault, family violence, possession of a firearm during the commission of a felony, and 2 counts of cruelty to children in the 3rd degree. Judge Sean Deanna C. Morris scheduled the sentencing for August 28, 2023, the very next week. Attorney Sterling mentioned the possibility of working out a deal with the state before the sentencing date. On August 28, 2023, Judge Morris addressed the court and mentioned that Quaneesha did everything right. The police should not have left the 2 people in conflict alone.
On the day of the incident, Ms. Johnson, I believe that you took all the necessary steps to ensure your safety after Mr. Smith had threatened to inflict bodily harm upon you. And it does not matter that you stayed out all night, or even if you stayed out for a week and leaving your children with whomever.
To 20 years of voluntary manslaughter. Quaneesha is to spend 10 years in confinement, with the first 5 years in prison and the second 5 years under house arrest. The remaining 10 years of the sentence is to be spent under probation. Her house arrest sentence included employment, medical visits, and minor children's school activities conditions. She can only leave her house between 6 a.m. and 6 p.m. She is also not allowed visits from anyone with a felony conviction.
As follows. As to voluntary manslaughter, I will sentence you to 20 years to serve 10 years in confinement.
Her Count 2 aggravated assault charge was merged into the Count 3 voluntary manslaughter by operation of law, and she was sentenced to 10 years, which is to run with her manslaughter charge. She was sentenced to 5 years for the possession of a firearm during the commission of a felony. For her last charge, cruelty to children in the third degree, she was sentenced to 12 months probation. Her children were ordered to see a licensed therapist twice a month for a year. Quaneesha is also required to enroll in and complete parenting classes with her minor children within her 12-month probation. Attorney Sterling requested for an appeal bond and that Quaneesha's current bond conditions be upheld because the defense was filing for appeal immediately.
An appeal in this case, so I would request at this time that Ms. Johnson be granted an appeal bond and be allowed to stay out on the current conditions, the current bond she has.
Prosecutor Farhan countered this request because, regardless of the circumstances, Quaneesha ended a man's life and was found guilty by the jury. She wanted to be reunited with her children, but Demonte would never get that opportunity. The prosecutor then requested that Quaneesha be remanded immediately.
But the jury, as it stands now, has found her guilty of voluntary manslaughter, so the state would be asking for remand to start today.
Judge Sterling, however, ruled in the defense's favor and allowed Quaneesha to remain on bond until her appeal. This new bond carries the same house arrest conditions as her convictions. The state was given room to include conditions to her bond, and the prosecutor agreed with the house arrest condition and also included that no weapon must be found in Quaneesha's house. Attorney Sterling also asked that Quaneesha be allowed to go job hunting and attend job interviews. The judge also allowed this, granting that her interviews are between 8 a.m. and 4 p.m. Demonte's sister gave a victim impact statement where she described her late brother as her rock and anchor. In her statement, she talked about how Demonte had loved Quaneesha and was always telling everyone about how lucky he was to be with her. Demonte's mother, Brenda Campbell, also gave her victim impact statement and explained to the court that Demonte was not the monster the defense had painted him out to be. After the court adjourned, Quaneesha was asked in an interview about how she felt during the trial and if she wishes she could have changed anything that happened on November 27, 2022. She communicated that she wished the police had done more than they had that morning. She wished she had gotten her children out of the house and left, but she did not think the outcome would have been different, given the situation that morning. What are your thoughts on the Quaneesha Johnson case? Would you say this self-defense or a well-disguised murder? Do you believe justice was truly served? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. We would love to hear from you. If there's a case you would like us to cover, don't hesitate to drop your recommendations in the comment section below. For more captivating true crime stories, like, share, and subscribe to our channel.